better that way.
They can't hear us.
This meeting of the Town of Camden Harbor Committee on Tuesday, November 12th, 2024 is called to order. This is a public meeting. Minutes are recorded. The meeting is broadcast on Zoom and recorded for YouTube replay. Please turn on your microphones. Public commenters, please step up to a microphone. None of those today. Please direct your comments through the chair and keep your comments on point and concise. And we have an agenda today. And we've had the roll call. We've determined that Liz was the last alternate to vote, and we do not need an alternate vote today because we have all 5 voting members present.
It should be copy around.
Uh-huh.
Taking up too much room here.
And Susan. Okay, no. Well, we have no non-members attending at the moment. Do we have any non-agenda items that anyone wants to present? Okay, I have a couple things. Some or all of us might be aware of an organization in our community called Camden Can. And Camden Can has been fairly active and having public meetings and talk sessions. And there is a periodic newsletter. And I have a document here, Camden Community Action, which was published on September 24th. And in that release, there are some Harbor Committee issues presented, and I'd just like to share them with you. We have a Harbor Committee investigating non-fossil fuel waterfronts. We'd also like to encourage that group to create a process that ensures that anyone with a Camden mooring, parentheses, for boats with accommodations, document their use of the free pump out boat in order to get a mooring renewal. We'd also like a report on the equitable and fair turnover of Camden moorings. And also, what about focusing on incentives to discourage ships burning large amounts of carbon? See Bar Harbor's work on this. Harbors belong to more than the folks who already have boats or own boatyards. So that was published by Camden Can. I happened to read it, and it was not expressed to me directly that they had these requests. But I wanted to make everyone aware that Camden Can had made those requests of the Harbor Committee.
When was that published?
September 24th. Jeremy is not with us this morning, and I wanted to ask him about an update on the resiliency roadmap. I wonder if Janice, do you have any?
I do not.
No, nothing to share on
I thought I
that.
saw him when I walked by.
Is he here?
Susan?
No, I was gonna just check and see.
Oh,
I thought I saw him when I walked by.
is that right? Oh, okay. While Susan is looking into that, we had a brief discussion previously about committee bylaws and the fact that the committee handbook calls for bylaws. Janice, are you aware of any bylaws on the books for the Harbor Committee?
No, you just have what's in the
Right,
code.
okay. In the
Chapter 6.
committee handbook, there is a bylaws template. And it's on page 29.
Madeline's gonna let him know when he comes in.
Okay.
She's not here yet.
Oh, I guess
Okay.
maybe
Here's,
was his doppelganger.
Yes, doppelganger.
I got one.
Love it that you use
Richard, do you have that? Page 29.
Not with me.
Okay.
Yeah, I have one.
It's a pretty simple document. And I wondered if perhaps we could go through that very quickly today and fill in the blanks. Is that agreeable with everyone?
Honestly, I'd rather just have it as an agenda item so that we look at it at a time.
Okay, so have the next meeting then?
Yeah,
Okay, very good. Bylaws, next meeting. All right, well, please review the form and come back next month with your questions
my
and issues.
glasses.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Elliot, in terms of the thing you just read from Camden Cam,
Yes.
are you intending that be the future agenda item and we react to that?
Well, how does everyone feel about it? What are your comments about Camden Can's requests for action on the part of the Harbor Committee?
Well, my feeling would be, for starters, Camden Can doesn't have any power to order us to do anything. But just in terms of our own purview of the harbor, we may want to look at that and say, is there anything there that we're interested in? We feel we should be doing and shouldn't be doing. I think the pump out boat keeps a record of who pumps out their boat.
Well, they're asking to tie that to mooring renewal.
It might be nice to have somebody from them come and,
Yeah, it's sort of an
So-
odd way for you to find out about it.
yeah, like they should
Yeah.
maybe present what they're looking for.
Mhm.
with some more
Haven't
background.
we talked about pump out and mooring renewal at some point in the past, a couple of years ago? Wasn't there a discussion about that?
I don't know.
I'd ask our historian over
I
there.
I have no recollection, but that doesn't mean much.
Are they saying they want to make
They
sure
want-
boats are pumping out before you get,
Yeah, one tied to the other.
Yeah. right.
Am I going to be,
what if you?
am I
you
not
don't-
going
what
to
if you
be
don't-
renewed because I have a composting head and never
Right.
pump out?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is some
This is,
gray
this is a
area.
real,
Yeah.
this is a real quagmire,
Yeah.
ready to be stirred.
Appropriate choice. of words.
Pump out, yeah.
Mhm.
I suggest that we circulate that and it be on another agenda item to decide if we want to just say, thank you for your thoughts, or if there's some particular item that we
Right.
want to do something about or look at further.
Or give us a little more information why these arose.
Okay.
Are they finding things in the harbor that
Right.
should?
How did you come by it, Elliot? You just found it?
I'm on the mailing list, Camden Can mailing list. I've participated in some activities and I was reading it one day and said, oh, look.
So it hasn't been submitted by anybody on?
No,
that
nobody
committee?
made any kind of formal request or informal request about it. I just read it there.
So I think it would be good to have it be on an agenda just to see if there's anything we want to
Right.
discuss. Because otherwise, 6 months or a year from now, someone will say, we made this request in September and nobody did anything.
Right.
Well, they
should,
they
And
put
will
it
you
on a piece of
circulate
paper.
that?
That's not really
Yeah.
a request. Thank you.
yeah, I
He's got it indirectly.
Well,
I can send this out to all the members for you to look at. And do we want to hear from a representative of Camden Can to?
I don't
No.
think before we have a chance to
Discuss
really
it.
absorb
I
it.
don't, probably unnecessary at this point.
Okay, I'll send this out and we can talk about it next time.
How long have they been meeting?
Camden Can's been
Yeah.
around for a couple of years.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Really?
It came up before.
Yeah, it's been,
I forget.
Molly Mulhern
Mullen
is
has
the-
been heavily
is the
involved.
It's
driver.
been the driver.
There's usually stuff in the paper as we transition from paper to paper.
Right.
Uh-huh. Okay, very good. So we have the bylaws template. I wanted to
Probably should make Camden Cam aware that it's on our agenda. Let them decide whether to show up or not.
Okay,
That could use up a meeting.
I don't want to be inviting a 20-minute
Yeah.
lobbying effort before we've even really read it.
I don't, I'm not inviting them. I'm just making them aware that it's on the agenda. If they, I don't
I
know.
would say, let them follow our discussion online, and if they feel they need to say something about it,
That's fine.
okay.
request an audience.
Yeah, there might be things in there that deserve some time and there might not.
Okay. I have a suggestion to make to the committee, and that is to invite a representative of the town finance department to give us an overview of harbor finances and to tell us about how revenues and expenses are identified, and just so we have some understanding of that.
I think that's a good idea before if we are taking up harbor fees again in the near future.
That's coming up later in the meeting there. But yes, that would support that activity.
I very much support that, because every time I go over the budget, I see mysterious bookkeeping.
Okay, well, then I will make a request to the town manager that we have a presentation by a finance department representative. Okay. Okay, well, then moving on. Meeting minutes approval. We have meeting minutes from August 13th, which were published yesterday. And I wanted to comment that that was our first meeting as in the newly formed Harbor Committee back in August. And it was a pretty full discussion. If you've looked over all the things that we talked about, and we came out of that meeting with some action items, channel markers being one of them, an ordinance review, which we've touched on since then, and solutions for additional dinghy docking capacity, the ever recurring topic. So we have those meeting minutes and also the meeting minutes from last month, October 8th. Regarding both of those minutes, I do have one comment, and that is that Susan's last name is Dorr. Are there any other comments on the meeting minutes of August 13th and October 8th?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any discussion about the meeting minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, minutes. Richard, approved 5-0. Thank you, Mark, for preparing the minutes for October 8th. Set date for December meeting. Second Tuesday in December is, anybody got a calendar here?
10th?
Should be the 10th.
10th.
10th? Yep. Does that sound good? Next meeting, December 10. Any conflicts with the town that you're aware of, James?
You have a second Tuesday, sir.
Second Tuesday, okay. December 10, 8 a.m. Harbor Master report. Harbor Master will not be joining us this morning. He is, as we speak, involved with pulling the floats at Steamboat. I did go over there and talk with him very briefly regarding the ramp repairs. He said he was expecting delivery of the concrete slabs at the end of November, this November. And they will be staged at the turnaround there at the end of Steamboat Landing Road until next spring. Installation, he's projecting for March. Regarding the mercantile, all of us, or most of us, or some of us are probably aware that the mercantile is now berthed at the town dock.
Could we go back to the launching ramp again, just for a
Yes.
second?
Yeah.
Was there any conversation at the Harbor Committee regarding that total rebuild?
Was there a conversation
Were
here?
we in the loop at all?
It's come up many times.
Yeah. And what do you mean by total rebuild?
Are you concerned about it?
The floats or the ramp? Or both?
The ramp is what the slabs are for,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
There was definitely conversation about that, and the sort of philosophical of, so what would we want to see there in 20 years and all of that, but that we need to do something with what's there now, and that we were putting, my memory is, bigger slabs in that will hopefully last better, and that even those slabs lasted quite a while before they got to a conversation topic. That's
The
about
new
what I
slabs are
remember.
supposed to have a better anchoring system too. I don't know.
My husband mentioned that too. He said, I didn't remember exactly the dimensions of the slabs, but he was like, well, I hope they're a heck of a lot bigger, or, something about the anchoring. So I'm
I think it's 2, not 3,
Per
Was it
unit.
bigger and deeper?
bigger and deeper.
Yeah,
They're
big.
so we
wider.
can,
So the theory
I
is
believe they're
that,
bigger in all dimensions.
right, so the theory, the working theory that we're on right now is that heavier pieces of concrete will be less likely to move around.
With anchoring systems, et
Yeah.
cetera. Good. I mean, I don't remember all the details, but we were in the loop. And I remember there being conversation about, there's so many unknowns, whether it's, sea barriers or Lyman Morse projects or whatever, that that launching area can't wait for long-term decisions to be made. It needed stuff now.
So according to the minutes that nobody really reads, the slabs are 8 inches thick, 5 inches wide, 15 feet, or 5 feet wide and 15 long.
And are they tied together?
thank you. I do not remember those off the top of my head. Yes.
And so they're going to be tied together with tabs and bolts the way the others were, or?
As far as
We
I know,
have
I-
town employees who are able, that I don't know, but it's.
Public Works is doing the
Right,
installation. Yeah.
are
But I
they
know that FEMA
versed
was.
in this? Yeah.
What's that?
Does it take a specific type of build
That I
or?
don't know. Steve described a different anchoring system that's deeper. And I do know that representatives from FEMA have been part of the discussion with the town in terms of the, making it more durable.
Because obviously,
Yeah.
having the skill to make sure it's done correctly is
Yeah.
important too.
Yeah, I think that they felt confident
Okay, good.
that, the Public Works.
I have a fair degree, high confidence in Dave Lawrence.
I
Good,
do
good.
too. Absolutely.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, so, thanks.
Yeah.
So Elliot, I just out of curiosity, because cement slabs are being stored in with the turnaround there. My memory is that's usually where the floats are. Are they also going to be there, or are they going somewhere else?
They're putting the floats along that lawn, with the hillside up to the Lyman Morse building. Running, they're kind of setting on the road and on the grass.
We could take a field trip over there at the end of the.
No, we don't need
And
to.
and see, look and see where they
I was
put
just curious because there was also discussion of how good are they and whether they would. It doesn't matter.
Or we could just say we don't need to micromanage them.
Yeah.
We got a pretty good idea what they're doing.
Right.
Wasn't there a bid out for
That's what
new
I thought.
floats though in the discussion about some going to Curtis Island and some going in the Inner Harbor?
Yeah, I'm not sure, well, I haven't heard anything that's progressed on that.
Right. I don't know what the disposition of the existing floats is going to be, but there will be new floats next year, 2025.
I know that the Curtis Island project definitely has their eyes on 2 or 3 of them.
Right.
They've got a capital campaign, they're launching a capital campaign to create a ramp system to allow construction materials to go up for the renovation project. And at the base of that would be 2 or 3 of those floats being repurposed over there. But that's just launching right now.
And there were some bids in for new floats for Steamboat, I believe,
There-
several
yeah,
companies.
yes.
Yeah,
And I'm not
Yeah,
sure,
that's all
I have no idea where
That's
that
done.
stands.
it wasn't last time, but it is.
Well, I know they were, getting bids from the outfit in Portland and Two Harbor was interested.
Right.
But when you say 25, is that for spring of 25 to have new floats at Steamboat Landing?
That I don't know. I don't know. the
Yes,
particulars.
I believe
I would
that
think
that's.
so.
Well, the launching ramp pieces, they've been coming next month for about 7 months, so. I would caution you not to hold your breath on any of this stuff.
Well, the plan isn't to start on that until March anyway, so
Right.
according to what we're being told.
Well, I'll be real
Until I
curious to
them, I'm
see
not gonna believe.
what happens at Curtis, because those floats at Steamboat Landing are really thick. It's not like a normal float that you think of.
That's a Curtis Island discussion that
Right.
Right.
I'm sure will come back to visit us at times.
Any other discussions?
I wasn't, but that's a good one. Halloween was a couple of weeks ago.
Any other discussion about Steamboat launch ramp? The Mercantile is now berthed on docks. I asked Steve how, well, no, let me ask this. Susan, how does it come to happen that the Swift was relocated at the docks?
So when we discussed this at the select board meetings, which you attended, it was agreed that the best short-term resolution was to get the Mercantile on the dock. And the Swift was at that spot, as you all know, this is all, everybody knows all of this. Ray was quite resistant to moving it. And when Steve went down, once the agreement, Audra was in touch with all of the parties involved and was satisfied that there was in fact a chain of ownership that was sufficient for there to be insurance written for the boat. Once it reached the dock, that was the main requirement. And as Steve described it to me, it was about a less than an hour project to swing the Swift around and tuck it into that berth just in the first one in behind the head of the
old mistress berth.
the old mistress berth. Even though it already had the winter house on it, he brought a couple of whalers. The wind was in the right direction, and the opening on the winter house, which was facing the dock, when they were able to just swing it around, the wind was favorable, and just tuck it in so that the opening on the house is on the dock side, but it went from port side to starboard side. And it seems copacetic as far as I haven't heard anything to the contrary. The agreement initially had been up until March 15th, and Audra felt that it was just in the interest of, who's going to move that boat on March 15th. So in her discussion with the principals involved, it seemed like it made more sense to just extend it. I'm looking at this agreement, it just extended to
End of
April
April.
30th.
And the other issue there is that winter berthing ends April 30th. So it just correlates with all
Just correlates with
that.
that.
Makes sense.
I haven't been directly in touch with anybody about it. I was away, and, there's no, I don't know whether they plan to put a cover on her or what's.
Well, they
going to
took the
happen.
sails off.
The sails are off.
Last time I spoke to Andrew, he was out looking for a collapsed building that he could try and get some wood off of. But at this point, there's no cover.
Yeah. It's, I think that given that we have a short-term agreement with an end date, is the best possible outcome for the moment.
Can't wait till April 30th.
So when we say
Already
the town
extended.
dock, we mean it's at the place that we intended it to be. It's not
Yeah.
on its way there.
No.
Except
it's-
I would like to
should be
point
there.
out one thing. After all the discussion about the Merc being tied to the town dock, it's not tied to the dock.
No, it's tied to
hanging
those
off the four
moorings.
moorings.
Yeah, those four moorings.
And it's about 2 to 2.5 feet away from the dock.
And I know there was that Steve did some work. They shifted those moorings a little bit. A couple of them were too big to be moved, but but that was when they were talking about rafting her off
Right.
Swift, which
Or
Ray,
farther away.
yeah, and Ray objected heartily to that, and I agree. I thought that was not a sound
That was never a
strategy. No,
rational
it was just the
direction.
liability there was not a good idea. And Ray said when he owned all those boats, he was fine with them
Yeah.
banging up against each other, but that was.
I guess we should also point out that the Merc is tied to town power. I don't know if they're being billed separately, but at least I believe they now have an adequate bilge pump system
Mhm.
and alarms that might keep it from sinking at the near dock.
Yeah.
So if there was just curiosity, if there was a power outage, how long would the Merc have before it was in trouble?
Well, we get Andrew out there.
With a 5-gallon
Away.
pail, right?
Well, I mean, sometimes the ramps come out in a big storm too. Last year, Steve took the ramps out, so you couldn't get to
Mhm.
the boats. You
Mhm.
kind of had to just watch and
Mhm.
cross your fingers.
That sounds like a plan.
Not that has, but just, yeah.
There's a manual pump on the boat.
Well, it was just a
it's a
story
battery
about this.
system also.
This catamaran was sinking on the news last night, and they had like the full crew down there losing the battle with some bulkhead that had gone loose.
Whatever systems you install are secondary to whether anyone's actually taking observations and keeping track of it, what the water in the bilge height is. I mean, we're assuming that someone's doing that.
That's, I believe that's been Andrew's responsibility since
Well, I
it's
think-
been here.
The town has an agreement, the boat is there, and now we just, my grandmother would say, need to wait and see custard. See how it develops.
Yeah, there's a leap of faith element in this whole thing that, you know,
Okay, so there it is. The Merc is sitting in the harbor. Andrew got what he wanted.
maybe.
He's
That thing
taking
about
steps.
tears and
We have to
answered
reassess
prayers.
whether that's what he actually wanted.
Yeah. Okay, moving on, harbor fees 2025. In our ordinance, in Article 4, 108-9, Select Board and Fees. The Select Board, by its last meeting in November of each year, shall establish a schedule of user fees for town facilities for the harbor. And it goes on with other wordage, but basically the Select Board is to act by the end of November.
Mhm.
In the past, the Harbor Committee has reviewed harbor fees and submitted recommendations to the Select Board. And I wondered if our past chairman present can tell us how that transpired. Why did we review the fees?
You're referring that to me?
You are a past chairman of the Harbor Committee, I believe, as is Richard.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I'd have to go look at old minutes to see what we did when. I think that the select board, reviewing the stuff at the end of November is probably somebody's imagination or dream. I don't think it ever really happened on that schedule, but I'd have to go look. We do review the fees and send it off to the select board, and we've done that for many years.
Well, we have always done that since I've been involved. And I think it's good policy for the select board to review the fees. However, or not the select board, the harbor committee to review the fees. However, select board and town manager seem to have different opinions. And some of the fees are, I want to point out one thing. It's $85 a night for electricity for a transient boat, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, of course.
But the harbor committee or the select board feels that's what it should be. And they didn't agree with any of our recommendations last time, so,
Well, it was worse than that.
yeah, it was.
I honestly, I don't know if Susan was aware, but it left incredibly bad taste that frankly, I thought, why are we spending all this time? Anyway, but we spend all this time on proposed fees, and then it goes to the select board, and there's a whole another list that we've never seen that was presented for review and approval by the select board. So what did we waste our time for? It was extremely disrespectful.
Where did that come from?
Town manager.
And were they wildly different from what you had
Yes,
proposed?
it
Well,
was.
substantially.
Yeah.
It was like we just.
Fairness had nothing to do with it. It was how much what is the maximum amounts we can charge?
And is that what's reflected in the current
Yes.
list,
Yes.
those
Yes.
increases?
$85 a night for electricity,
It says here 90.
is it? Yeah,
45
Electricity
for
fees.
30 amp and 90 for 50 amp.
There was
For
a,
one day.
I wonder
there was a dramatic increase in the
at
windjammer,
the
ridiculous.
23 and 24 next
windjammer
year.
fees at the head of the harbor.
For what fees?
The windjammer fees at the head of the harbor. I don't know what, I
Same.
don't know what the numbers were, but it was something like a 50% increase.
No, the windjammer fees stayed the same. What they did is they added the pump out, what they
Includes.
Charge.
assumed would be pump out fees for the
Then
windjammers.
there's a-
They added that into the total fee.
Well, I remember Barry presenting at the select board meeting that
That's because it wasn't explained well on the harbor fees. All right, but
there was a lot more money out of pocket. I know that. He was concerned that it was difficult for him to budget his,
I don't have a copy of the current fees. but-
Right here.
Can you see that?
That's right.
Do we don't have a 20, where can we find a
Yeah,
23?
where do we stand since it's November now? To my knowledge, we haven't proposed a schedule to be reviewed by the select board by the end of the month. Maybe out of frustration, feeling it doesn't do any good, but, you know, where are we on that?
Well, Stephen, your question, I feel is valid, and that's why I asked how it happened in the past. No one approached the harbor committee to review the fees for 2025. And therefore, it wasn't on our agenda and we didn't discuss it. But here it is November and the select board is by ordinance supposed to be acting on the fees. So that's why I brought it up.
I think I would recommend, I'll even make a motion, that we specifically ask the select board point out that the ordinance says we're meant to review them, point out that we have not been given, and I don't think we should be proposing the fees, that's a staff function based on the economics we were talking about, et cetera. But that it says we're meant to review them, we haven't received them. It's almost the end of November. And they're meant to act in November, so are we meant to make recommendations on harbor fees to the select board, or are they saying that the ordinance, it's really in the ordinance that we're meant to be doing this?
Not the harbor committee, the ordinance state.
The select.
Oh, the select board.
Board, by its last meeting in November of each year, shall establish a schedule of user fees, blah, 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 for the harbor.
Yeah, and so I guess.
But
I would-
my recollection is that we always proposed the schedule of fees for the harbor.
Well, we
That's
weren't,
my thought too.
And,
we were making it up from whole cloth.
well,
From history.
We're reviewing the previous
we
fees.
looked at the previous year. and Made our recommendations.
Well, I just think that there's a way to run a railroad, which would be that the staff, the finance department, et cetera, should be reviewing what the numbers look like, that they should come to us for review, and we can suggest something different from that, and then to the select board. So we don't have us spend all this time, but staff is doing it, and then the select board says, well, let's throw the harbor committee away, because we're really looking at staff anyway. It's not an ego thing, it's a obviously logical sequence that should be followed.
What we've done in the past is we've looked at with other harbors, similar harbors.
We
and
have looked
compared
at
the
other
fees.
harbors.
We've spent a lot of time doing all that. And we came up with our fee structure. And then last year, we suggested that we not raise fees because they were stable and they were appropriate and fair.
So if
But
last year,
they felt that was not appropriate because we're in the process of charging as much as we can charge and feeing everybody to death.
so last year they raised them significantly.
Yes.
So if we give them to the,
And that
finance
had
people-
nothing to do with us.
right, if what's gonna happen if we get a fee schedule that they want, and it's another significant increase,
And that's all up to the
right,
select.
I'm just
board.
wondering if since it
Well, at
was
least
so,
we'll be expressing opinions
I know.
on something that's going into the funnel
yes.
as opposed to.
But
just-
if we already know it was significant last year and you wanted to keep
I
it.
think, Susan, we've expressed our opinions, haven't we?
Well, we could recommend that they stay the same this year since we wanted to last year,
Well,
without
and
looking at the numbers, but.
I'm meeting with Audra either today or tomorrow about agenda for the meeting next week. And there's nothing that would prevent us from rolling it over into December, even though the ordinance says, we could say, we
Mhm.
looked at it and it requires further discussion. I feel like it's respectful to this committee to have you weigh in. And even if what you're saying right now is weighing in, saying that this last round seemed like a significant jump, and you were
Annoyed.
not in favor of it, and that if there's going to be another, I'd like to see what's being proposed, but that there's, I think I've made myself clear that I respect the work of these town committees, and I don't want to see your time be disregarded and not taken into consideration. And that's why you exist as a group, not to be disregarded. And so to that end, I'll chat with Jody and see, and see where this stands. At this point, I haven't seen a draft of, Janice, do you know whether or not there's a draft of new fees?
I don't think so.
No,
Jody Hanson is the one you probably.
right,
Not Jody Richards.
right.
Oh, right, you've got two Jodys.
You've got two
Yeah.
Jodys. I know. I don't have any problem with, I know that for planning purposes, for the Windjammers and the day sailors, that budgeting is important. They're looking to their fiscal years and how they're going to plan. So certainly time is a consideration. But I would happily bring your sentiment to the board and saying, I guess what I want to understand better, and I don't, is did these collected fees adequately cover the costs that we're looking to cover in town? That's the way this is
The
supposed
Harbor
to work.
Committee is a profit center, yes.
Yeah.
The Harbor Committee.
Or not the Harbor, I'm sorry.
I'm not seeing it.
The harbor is a profit center,
Yeah.
yes.
The obvious,
We don't know what those numbers are. We don't know what,
Right.
but
Well,
that's
that's
why.
part of this
that's
financial
why
analysis.
we're
It'd be
putting
nice to have an
that
informal
request forward so that we
recommendation for you.
understand just how much of a
Yeah.
profit is being made at the harbor and where do those resources go?
it just goes into the general fund.
And so when you answer that question, you say snowball, well, okay, if the harbor is going to be more than break even, predictably, season after season after season, regardless of the weather, unlike the snowball. We subsidize the snowball to endless extents, to the tune of millions of dollars that have been spent up there. And yet we are not concerned that there be a profit in that area.
That's
Whereas-
a whole nother issue.
Well,
No, I'm making it's a for example.
Mhm.
We're contrasting the harbor as a revenue source as opposed to the snowball as a revenue source. They're both assets of the town. And they attract visitors.
but I can see, and this is why having the financial element brought to us in some discernible, not micromanaged format, and the proposed fees and rationale for that at a meeting so that we can express our opinion and then select board can decide what to do. Because I can see the conversation where I would be coming, that I don't think there's anything inappropriate about the thought that the harbor might be helping to subsidize other recreational programs around the town, the Snow Bowl, Barrett's Cove, et cetera. But we can't really have that conversation if we have no idea, what the cash flow is out of the harbor between fees coming in and Steve, et cetera, expenses going out. We're just sort of flapping our gums.
Well, we are, but we've done it in the past in a manner of what is fair and reasonable.
Well, that's
Okay.
part of the equation.
Yep. And that's the only part we've been looking at. We haven't been looking at expenses. It's like, just what's a fair and reasonable fee?
And that's a
That
comparison.
doesn't fly because that's just not enough.
Well, but that what's fair and reasonable is based on some comparison to another harbor of equal standing. And how many opportunities are there on the coast of Maine for windjammers to have a place to sail from?
Yeah, but windjammers are a protected species here, okay? We don't raise their fees.
Well, so,
Well,
I
let's
mean,
see,
pretty
so we
much
have
things
protected
just get
windjammers, we
raised
have
every year.
protected
And at one point,
lobsters.
do we say they're fair and reasonable for a couple of years? I mean, every year with our ticket price, we go, okay, things are raised, so we got to raise a couple bucks. I mean, everything's just goes
I
up
will
and up
say,
and up.
in terms of what Mark's talking about, that the fees that exist today, we've never actually, the harbor committee has never discussed those fees, other than the fact that we got completely ignored and disrespected, and that was sort of the beginning, the end for the old administration. So we haven't had a conversation about what those are. We were never asked or given an opportunity to weigh in, and I think that's what we need to get in motion is, a logical sequence of input.
So Ron, to get back to what you're questioning here, the windjammers in 2019, their fee was $4,190.
Conversation might be.
Okay? And currently, their fee is $4,500. And the difference there was what the pump out costs expected to cost, okay? That's the only reason that number went up, is because it included pump outs.
Okay, and we have a lot to say about
On
harbor
that brief
fees. But just to recap here, there's nothing in the ordinance that states that the harbor committee is to review the fees. The select board determines the fees every November. That is stated in the ordinance. Historically, the harbor committee has reviewed the fees and submitted recommendations to the select board, possibly unsolicited. How do we want to proceed? Bob, you introduced a motion, and I can't recite that verbatim.
It became conversational as the more I talked. I guess I would make a motion that we specifically ask and suggest to the select board that they have staff compile recommended fees, present them to us, that we have a financial explanation of the harbor income and expense picture. And then we present our recommendations on those to the select board for their action in December.
I'm just shooting Jody an email, see if she can send me.
So is that a motion?
And well,
That was a motion.
he's made a motion, and is there a second for that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Alternates can't second?
I'll second the motion. I mean, I think we need to hear more detail, or some detail.
Okay, all right, so we have a second. Now let's have a discussion about that motion. What, if I understand correctly, Bob is asking that there be a analysis of the harbor finances presented to the harbor committee for its consideration.
Along with staff's what they're proposing or gonna say to the select board for
Fee changes.
25 fees. And then we will express our opinion to the select board. And if they say, we don't care about your opinion, honestly, I can't imagine a topic that's sort of like more right down the middle of the strike zone for the harbor committee than these fees. But if they don't want our opinion, I don't want to spend time giving it.
Okay, Susan?
Yeah, you okay with this
Yeah,
discussion,
yeah.
Susan?
Well, and again, I just want to reiterate, I do want to know what your opinion is, and that's not, you're not going to get that kind of a welcome from me. That said, I've just asked Jody, and she may not be at her desk or able to respond right now, but to see if if there is a proposed 2025 fee schedule and what that's based on, but I don't think there would be a problem with us rolling this over.
Yeah, we don't
It would be
need
nice
see
to
it
remind them
today.
of their jump
Right.
from 23 to 24.
Right.
So your fees went up considerably then.
I'd have to see them, but personal, all of ours, I mean, we all have boats in the harbor. It all, but I wasn't on the committee. and wasn't-
Susan?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I wasn't there either.
I'm curious if you're willing to share a response to the premise of the motion. And that is that the town presents a harbor financial analysis, let's say, revenue and expenses, and planned fees for 2025 to the harbor committee, all of those things. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it seems to me like that's a core part of why this committee exists. And those of you who've had a longer history, I would ask you, is that something that has been in your scope of practice over time?
Well, I'll say that we have reviewed the fees from year to year and submitted recommendations to the select board. We have done that without the related financial backup, no revenue and expenses breakdown at all, ever, other than looking at the annual report. And I've done that over multiple years and tried to figure out where these things are and how they apply to the harbor. And I don't have success in doing that. And it makes me question the whole report for that reason, because I look at that particular thing and I don't see answers apparent.
Right.
But I'm wondering, is there a comparable scenario in town where a committee asks for such information and it receives it?
Well,
Is there another committee
Well-
that gets involved in setting fees?
right, well, and I think you're the only committee that oversees such a revenue generating part of the town.
Well, there's
Well,
also
and
the
there's
part of the
thinking out loud.
public face.
There's
So if I
parts-
see somebody down at the harbor and they complain about their fees, I can have a little background of what,
Well-
there's a bit of,
Planning board?
Well,
they don't
planning
set
board
fees.
has a fee schedule for permits. It's not as extensive.
The
Well, they're not-
obsolete park, rec and park committee?
Parks and Recs and the Snow Bowl, which is a whole nother,
Snowball is a whole different kind of,
They're not
because
setting
of the way it's
fees.
budgeted, right, Janice? It's
Right.
an enterprise fund. It functions differently in the budget.
So just for the record, day sailor fees, in 2020, they were $2,600. And in 2024, they are $2,900. So an increase of $300.
2 points that I'd like to make is, one, I don't have full confidence in the staff presenting us the financial analysis, because presumably those are the people that put together the budget report. And things I've seen in the budget report that I would question about the harbor's profitability is that I think all of Steve's salary is charged to the harbor and benefits. State reimbursements for pump-out boats are not considered revenue to the harbor. So that there are probably some other things in there that don't give us an accurate position on the finance that I guess I feel it's our responsibility to parse that out if we're really interested in seeing the true cash flow of the harbor.
I think that's getting us into financial micromanaging that we're not competent to do. I'm not saying that I don't want this financial report to become, oh, now I got to spend a week doing all that. I would think the town would already, the select board would already want to know what the harbor department's cash flow looks like. And so I just want that
I would think it would
shared.
be appropriate too
And
to
if
just,
nobody has any idea what the comings and goings are financially, then that in itself would be an issue. If I was on the select board, I'd be concerned with.
Well,
Well, of
it's a
course they
concern.
are.
It's a
That, you know, that,
It's
the
a cons-
tracking is, the finances are being handled competently. And I think the reason why things are in one column as opposed to another, whether it's Steve's salary, whether it should be partly Parks and Rec and partly Harbor, pump out reimbursement. I know that there are explanations to that. I don't know what they are, but I know that we can get them. And I would be happy to, if we can present that as a committee saying, we'd love a better understanding. I don't know whether this should happen at a select board meeting or whether, if we can combine the two things so that we all have a better understanding about how those,
I guess
how
what
that
I would
cash
think
flow-
we need to know is what they're proposing for a schedule. And
Right.
we look at it and we
Right.
go, oh my gosh, they're raising this for boaters and harbor folk. It seems unreasonable. And then we can say, hey, why did this? And then they
Right.
could give us I'm not sure we need to see every little piece of
Right.
it.
right.
Okay, I'd like to clarify the motion that we approve 5-0. Bob, can you help? I'd like to state the words.
Maybe I'm wrong.
What are the words of the motion?
That we are informing the select board that we would suggest that at our next meeting, we receive the staff's proposed 2025 harbor fees and have someone from the staff come and present a general financial review of the income and expenses related to the harbor so that we can express an opinion on the proposed fees to the select board for them to consider on their annual review.
Okay. we all
For a lawyer,
That
concur?
sounds
was
very
good.
clear. That
Yeah.
sounds,
On
that
the-
sounds clear.
Yes, completely reasonable.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for doing
Well,
that.
it
I
puts
thought
the
you were
sequence of
ready.
events in the correct order.
Have to listen.
We can't make responsible decisions about rate increases or reductions
Hand moving so
if
fast.
we don't know
Stop writing it.
what the total revenue income is or what the total costs are. So we're being asked to, if, without the information that you're requesting, we can't really participate at an
Right, so
intelligent
I-
level.
I'll facilitate getting that to you so that you can distribute it to the committee so that we can all look at it. If there's a proposed fee schedule ready and any particular notes as to
Right.
what the
Why things have
increases might
changed.
be.
Yes. That's,
The bottom line is they better be getting it ready, even if it's the same
No,
as
of course
last
they
year.
will. Of course they are.
There's this calendar running and it doesn't get any better after December 15th, I suspect.
Right, no.
Well, the harbor fees are part of a larger schedule of fees.
Yeah.
And I read the schedule of fees last year and looked at the increases, and it wasn't just the harbor that got hit with increases. They were pretty much across the board. There was
snowball tickets.
the items that weren't raised
But I think that-
were the exception.
I think the distinction that we're recognizing here is that we're raising fees on business And that's unique to some extent in this town. I don't think there's any other committees that get involved in that. But the time limit is keyed to their seasonal business. They need to know what their rate increases are going to be for dockage and power and whatever else, insurance, so that they can make a projection regarding what they're going to charge in the upcoming season, because they got to get their brochures
We gotta
printed
order our brochures.
and
Yeah.
have those numbers decided upon. So
Susan, when is the next select board meeting?
Next Tuesday.
It's next Tuesday. Okay, I know it was deferred from today, is that right? To next week?
No,
It's
It's
deferred
next-
from election day.
next Tuesday.
Yeah, it is, but he's talking about your meeting.
Last week, I canceled the meeting last week.
Oh, okay, all right, so the next XB meeting is the 19th,
The 19th.
okay. Very good.
I have to say, in terms of snowball increases, I was shocked that my season pass went up $8.
Well, then every all just up a little bit. No, I'm pleased with my
Yeah,
seasons.
it went up from like
My dad is
45 to
my dad is
52.
horrified how cheap the senior Camden
I know,
resident
it's-
is.
I have also.
Yeah.
All right,
No, but just show, I mean, it all goes up a little bit at a time. No,
getting
Well,
back
in
to our.
light of concern for windjammer fees, let's not forget that there are hundreds of us that pay personal harbor fees. They keep going up.
and just because the harbor fees go up doesn't mean we raise our, personally, we don't raise our ticket prices every year because of that. You know, it's, you can't do it every year.
Okay, I'd like to move on.
Yep.
Next item on our agenda
we
is
need to
Curtis,
take a vote.
pardon me?
We didn't take a vote, did we?
Oh, I
Yes.
thought the guy
Oh,
was
yes, we did.
restating what
We
we
passed the
voted.
motion.
Oh, maybe.
We did vote.
Yeah, it was unanimous. He was just clarifying what
Oh.
the,
Okay.
what it was.
Elliot had to get it written down to pass on to
All
the
right.
select board.
Curtis Island Restoration, back last month or 2 months ago, we had a presentation by Michael Scaling, who representing the Curtis Island Lighthouse Foundation. And it was a very good presentation. I could tell that he was practiced at doing that. It's very polished. I was struck by the fact that there was not any harbor committee representation in that effort. In my apparent knowledge, none of us have been involved with the Lighthouse Foundation. Is that correct? Has anyone here been part of that organization? I think that the harbor committee should be represented. Does anybody else feel that way?
Is that a private organization?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know why we would be on that any more than we're on the
Yeah.
yacht club.
Well, that
Management.
might be a whole different topic. Good point. But okay, well, I'll cite, what I heard Michael saying is that the Lighthouse Foundation wanted to limit access to Curtis Island. Did anyone else hear that from him?
Discourage, I think, was more.
I think it's premature to put that into the mix. From I went out there, I was with Michael Scaling yesterday, working on an aspect of this. And I think that their concern in the short term is the amount of activity that's going to be going on out there with the restoration, if they're able to raise the funds. We're in the midst of, they've been drafting a memorandum of understanding and trying to hash out this sort of public-private relationship, liability, so on and so forth. I wouldn't jump to the conclusion, because all of that is still very much in it's very, very early stages of consideration. And they know that they're not in the position to make those kinds of determinations about, it's town-owned property. It's not going to be their decision. I think that while they've got a lot of construction going on out there, there may be areas that are restricted to the public just for safety and liability. And again, that's part of the agreement that they're working on. That's going to be, I'm hoping to talk with Audra about it. And, you know, Bill Kelly's got to look at it. It's a long way from being at all hammered out.
Susan, is there any understanding or consensus on the select board about town's financial contribution to this project?
No, and again, this is all really
I don't think
early.
they've gotten there.
I think it's very early days for it because the foundation has a very ambitious capital goal. They're just starting the first, and they're going to roll it out in phases. So the first part is going to be for the access ramp and the restoration of the small barn. And then they'll go on to the next parts of it, depending on how the funding flows.
Yes, Ron?
I think given that the island is owned by the town and the island is in the harbor, that it's probably something that the harbor committee should stay advised about moving forward. I think we should be in the loop in terms of being advised as to how their progress is, how they're progressing on fundraising and reconstruction and access. I mean, I think access is going to end up being a sticky point, especially if it's tried to be limited, but that's just a micro thing. But I do, to answer your question, I think we should be in the loop. I think we should be involved in the conversation regarding Curtis Island.
So the harbor committee should have a seat at the table.
I think it's part of our purview because it's a town-owned property and it's in the harbor.
Okay, and do we generally agree on that?
I'm not quite sure I mean, I definitely agree that our opinion should matter. I definitely think that the heavy lifting is being done by the people raising the money to do all of this. So maybe there will be attention down the road. And I remember that phrase about limiting access and thinking, oh, the people that have been there forever with extremely limited access would like to have it fixed up and then keep it like that. But it's really an issue that applies to all sort of public parklands, whether it's the state park where you've got Mount Batty, you got Maidenscliff with a bunch of people, and then I go walking from the Youngtown Trailhead, and after 10 minutes, I don't see someone for an hour. So there's very different levels of public access. And I remember years ago with, I think it was Baxter and snowmobiles and stuff like that, that there's a huge debate between, does giving the public access destroy the thing we're trying to give them access to? But that's a conversation down the road. And I don't want us to be somehow shut out of the loop because, oh, they've never been interested, but I'm not sure that, I don't know what a seat at the table really means.
So is this group about the lighthouse or about Curtis Island?
It's about restoring the buildings.
Right.
The buildings are in pretty perilous condition. And all of that information is in the engineering reports that are on their website. And that's their goal.
So I
No, they fully recognize this is town-owned property. They don't ultimately have the say-so about how it will be used. I think part of the concern, you know, if 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 there's a float system that would allow big boats to tie up out there, is that something we weigh in on? How do people feel about that? What's the impact going to be? And again, those are conversations that definitely need to be had over time. Initially, there needs to be infrastructure created out there in order for the work to be done, for the buildings to be protected.
See, and that's kind of my thought process, is that access to the island might fall under our preview. But restoration of the lighthouse, that seems to be what they're doing, and there's no reason we need to step in and micromanage or try to overcomplicate that process.
Right.
So,
Okay, I have one of their, something that they've published. And on this here's developing an access plan on the back of it. Before any work can begin, needs improved access for construction crews and volunteers, current access compromised by erosion, et cetera. Back when our discussion following Michael Scaling's presentation, there were some comments about access, both for the construction and for visitors. Is there a member of the Harbor Committee that would like to volunteer to approach the Lighthouse organization to participate in their deliberations?
Regarding access?
Regarding, yes, access being a subject, but representing the interests of the Harbor Committee and of course, the residents of Camden, which everybody is trying to do in their own way. Is there somebody on the Harbor Committee that would be interested in representing us with the Lighthouse organization?
My feeling is we could modify that by saying, be involved with them and represent the Harbor Committee just during discussions of access. Because one of the things I'm thinking is that there may be two levels of access.
Exactly.
There may be an access plan for construction, and then there may be an access plan for people, visitors, post-construction. And they may be very different if they're talking, equipment and heavy materials, et
Right.
cetera.
Well, that was the point I made when we had that presentation. We've got two entirely different types of access.
I remember that, and Ron, you talked about access for construction.
Yeah.
And Steve and.
Personally, I don't see a conflict. Access to the coast of Maine is tidal, let's face it. It always has been for, anyway. The point being that it's high tide twice a day. So you have access twice a day, where you can just step out of your boat and onto the rocks. The other times of day, you're walking up slippery seaweed. So, but in terms of providing access to the general public, which might include having an excursion boat running people out there, I mean, we're going to hear these proposals as time goes by as to what we're willing to accept or not accept for access to the island. And to Bob's point, it's the challenge that every state and federal park is faced with, is how do you reach a compromise between providing access and protecting the resource?
How about if we put in a request to the foundation that they notify us at any point when they are discussing access so that we could send a member? I mean, I'd hate to put the burden on someone to have to go to every one of their meetings where they are not discussing things that are relevant to us.
Okay, who contacted Michael Scaling to bring him to the Harbor Committee? Stephen, would you be willing to contact him?
Nailed.
You should never have, it was that moment.
Yeah.
And express that to him.
Yes, I will.
That the Harbor Committee would like to be aware, made aware of
Right.
particular topics.
Because boy, they got a, long way to go
Uh-huh.
before.
If you would do that.
Okay.
But access is first and foremost in their conversation, I would think. They need that now.
Well, I think, yeah, part of it is, so since they're planning on doing this in stages, the whole types of access may vary.
Well, then they're planning on doing it in stages, which to me sounds obviously very long-term. So
Oh,
do
yeah.
we then allow, I have good friends who go out on their dinghies and have a picnic on the beach.
Sure.
How are we going to say nobody? Yeah.
Right.
So those kind of simple
Look,
access things
this
too.
is
I
something I've been talking about for years and years.
My understanding is that the kind of access that you're describing will not be restricted at all. And again, I think they just want to make sure they're trying to sort out questions around liability when there's construction going on.
Right, having them
Um,
gated off and whatnot.
Yeah. And then there are those three distinct spots out there, the middle one being one that has the appropriate grade for creating a ramp system to be able to get material and small construction vehicles and whatnot up there. And then the one to the, I don't know, northeast, if you will, is a much steeper, more difficult spot. There had been an outhaul there, but I don't think there's any plan to really use that actively. And then the one to the far right with that gentle beach will continue to just, I think what I recall Michael saying is rebuilding those stairs, which got washed away, so that small boats, dinghies, and can access that spot as people always have. They don't have any interest in preventing people from going out and enjoying that island at all, nor would they have the authority to do that.
Okay, so access, of course, is a concern, and visitor access and construction access also.
Yeah, well, I think, current visitor access is what it is. This whole project is going to determine whether that gets improved or not, because even though everybody has access now, it's very difficult access, even to that beach. It's covered with seaweed, rocks, going out there at low tide, you kind of take your life in your hand. And the haul out doesn't always work because, at low tide, it gets so knotted up with seaweed that it's difficult to use it. So I see that as something down the road. I think, the going and meeting with them is keeping us up to date on what's going on.
Okay, well, we look forward to hearing how Michael receives your.
Oh, I'm sure he'll be fine. And the other thing, is remember, this is all predicated on raising money, that this could happen, it could not happen.
Right, okay. All right, moving on. Our agenda, next item is Harbor Committee Work Plan, Issues and Initiatives. We haven't really had a shortage of issues, it seems, in our meetings that we've discussed. And I wondered if anybody has anything on their list, they're a big issue. Stephen?
Well, this I brought up when we briefly talked about what we wanted to talk about, but this would be 108-31. No, I'm sorry, it's 108-30. Okay, number 4, this is a section about floats and ramps in the outer harbor. Number 4 says municipal piers, municipal launching ramps, and extensions of existing dock systems for commercial marinas established on or before June 13th, 2017 shall be exempt from subsection B1 and B2, which B1 and B2 talk about the size of ramps. My issue with this is basically a zoning aspect of the harbor ordinance. And what this section says is that there are no limits on the number or length ultimately of floats that could be attached to a pier or floats by a commercial enterprise. Now, Lyman Morse used this procedure to build their 100-foot extension this past summer.
The part that's in the outer harbor is substantially less than 100 feet.
Right. And the truth is, I objected to that strenuously, and in part because when they put the buoy out for the site visit, the buoy actually turned out to be much further out than what they actually built. But my feeling is that unlike everything else that involves construction, both in the harbor ordinance and in the general zoning ordinance, this is the only thing that has no limit. And the abuse of this is potential, either by Lyman Morse or the successor to Lyman Morse, not trying to pick on anyone, but theoretically, under their rights, they could build a pier in the outer harbor off of the Beanyard area and then come back for a permit to put 300 feet of floats on that thing, because there is no limit to what can be done under this ordinance. Or as we pointed out at previous meetings, the review process for this type of permit is awfully limited. It's like eelgrass, clamming, access, et cetera, that somewhere in here, there's got to be something, I feel, about community standards.
Okay.
Are you in the 10830?
Yes. 10830,
It looks like the inner harbor and the inner harbor.
B4.
the outer and coastal harbors.
Oh, the outer and coastal.
Yeah, and if you go down to number 4, well, number 1 and number 2 govern the size and length of floats off of piers.
Yeah.
And number 4 says commercial ventures are exempt from those rules, with no substitute rules.
Oh, it doesn't say commercial on the inner harbor, I see.
I don't see that commercial, but
You're on
Number
outer
4.
harbors, number 4.
municipal.
There's commercial in there.
I thought that related to existing
Commercial
piers,
right there.
not piers that are built,
It's commercial's not in there.
permitted and built in the future, and then you have some unlimited float off of it. I thought that the key ingredient on the thing we talked about 6 months ago was that it was running off of their existing pier system.
Chair wishes to interject here. Stephen, first of all, the B4 does not state that there are no limits.
It doesn't state that there are no limits, but doesn't put any limits.
It's
Okay.
exempted from the
It does not
limits.
state that there are no limits, and that was your words, that you said that there are no limits. And
It's
not
exempted from limits.
presented that way. It is my recollection from our deliberations on this section of the code back last spring that this B4 was the result of a municipal election in recent years.
It was.
It was. Can always be changed.
Mhm. Okay. And Bob, it says extensions of existing dock systems for commercial marinas established on or before June 2017.
Right, so there's no, off the Beanyard, there's no existing,
No, but if you take the vagueness of this, is it the dock system that had to be established before 2017? Or is it a commercial enterprise?
I certainly took it as a dock system. when we were reading it before.
Commercial marinas.
Well, Lyman Morse is a commercial marina.
Yeah, but the bean yard.
Does it
isn't
have to be a
commercial marina,
specific
it's a
dock?
Storage yard.
And there's no
to
existing
me
dock
like
system
it's-
to extend.
Looks to me like it's just, it's
Okay.
granting a grandfather. That if it existed prior to June 13th, 2017, that it is not, then
Then it's
rules
exempt.
1 and 2 don't apply. It's just been grandfathered. It doesn't say anything about moving forward post June 13th, 2017.
Are they talking about extensions that happened before June 13th or they?
No, no.
Yeah,
Municipal
It
piers.
talks about existing dock systems that existed on June 13th.
Right.
And are getting extended.
And are getting extended.
Well,
No.
in the same principle, what would prevent them, from extending the existing dock system another 200 or 300 feet?
Well,
Well, that's-
all of this would require certain approvals over and above what's in this ordinance.
Yeah,
I read it as the
change.
extensions established on or before June 13th. That's how I
Well,
read
I
it.
guess I read that differently, that it was it might not just be the dock system, it might be the fact that there's a commercial marina, and it's all one property. It's,
No, I don't think it is.
tax-wise, it's separate?
Well, first of all, you have a public road, Steamboat Landing Road or whatever, that separates the bean yard from the other property. And that's usually considered a separate lot I'm really spinning off here, but for zoning purposes, planning board purposes, subdivision approvals, put a public road down the middle of something, you have two lots.
It's all inclusive. The entire sentence is included in the on or before June 13th. I'm no lawyer, but that's what it looks like to me.
But you play one on TV.
I would you have to give,
I remember that ad
For the
for
right-
the
for the
doctor.
right-
Robert Young going, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. Okay.
Okay. Stephen, you've pointed out this example within the ordinance. Can you propose a solution?
Well, one solution might just be to ask the town attorney how he looks at that sentence.
I read it the same as you. That if somebody wanted to build on there, then they're exempt from the restrictions. Obviously, you said there's channel restrictions and whatnot.
Right, but the channel became a moot issue over the current extension. And who knows, there was a willingness to move moorings. A lot of this just goes to the politics of the time. So,
I see it as a list of physical entities that were established on or before June 13th. And if they weren't,
We can debate the words here and what they mean and how they can be interpreted endlessly, which we've made a good effort at, especially last spring. We talked at length about this issue, others related to dock extensions. This example that Stephen has presented highlights, or this is an example of of the need for a review of the ordinance in its entirety. And there was discussion about this last month or 2 months ago, I believe, maybe 3, about there had been an ordinance review some years ago. And Richard, did you participate in that?
Yeah, it went on weekly for a long time.
Uh-huh.
That was when Jeff Nims was, before he retired as code enforcement.
Uh-huh.
He wanted to do a major rewrite, well, improvement, change to the harbor ordinance. And it got accomplished. It was difficult, but it was worthwhile. But it was also a difficult, time-consuming process for all involved.
I can understand that completely. Susan, can you share your view on what it takes to change the ordinance?
I can't, because it's not an area that I've looked into. I'd be happy to explore it a little bit. I mean, I think that given the demands on code enforcement at this point, it'd be unlikely that we were going to engage in a weekly protracted
Right.
process to go through the whole ordinance. If there were specific areas in the ordinance that, inconsistencies, I mean, I think that you're right that if there are inconsistencies that need interpretation,
Mhm.
and you can be a little more laser focused, it just, where I don't know that code enforcement is eager to take on,
Yeah.
Well,
line by line
having been
review of the harbor
involved,
ordinance, but
the code enforcement thing that we did, at least a really extensive one when I was on the committee, that was like so all encompassing with
yeah,
Google Docs going back and forth
Yeah,
on
yeah,
a daily basis. But if we have a couple of specific things, the procedure would be that we would write it, we would make a recommendation, it would go to the select board, they would decide whether or not to put it on the warrant, because it's an ordinance, has to go to a town vote, right?
yeah. And if it's, I mean,
Well, I
if
think
it
we're
pertains
missing
to
a step
code
there.
enforcement, I think it would have to go through,
Planning and
Planning.
development, yes, I think
planning
that's,
board would have to review it.
so what I would suggest, I mean, is for us to review the ordinance, if we see any glaring issues, that we put together a packet to submit to planning and development to review. And then from there, they take it to the select board.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't come right to
I,
us.
two things I want to add. One was, even if it turns out that on this float extension business, that it has to be off an existing pier, it still needs a limit. in my
Well,
opinion.
and I think that Elliot, if we go back to what Elliot first said, work plan. I have no problem with putting, it however we describe it, to generally review the ordinance, quickly review the ordinance and identify if there are any particular places that, but we don't need to do it today or have the
No,
items
I don't think so.
specified today. And the question of whether whether that contains any limits or should contain limits, we can put it on the work plan.
I also, in terms of this work plan, since we are talking about changes in the ordinance, of potentially introducing something where harbor fees start with us, as has been the tradition, even if it hasn't been written in law. And even though we wouldn't have the power necessary to enforce them, that they start with us, then go to the select board.
Well, I'm not sure what start with us means, because I do think that it actually starts with staff. Just as if we weren't in the equation, it would start with staff, and then the select board would say, give me a break. And that, so I don't really want to take on we don't have the ability to be taking on a review of all of the finances and what all the other harbors charge for stuff. But we can have an opinion on it, but we shouldn't be the person who has to come up with a coherent list from scratch.
Well, my feeling is we've done that for years.
Yeah, we have, and it's not coming up from a coherent list from scratch. It's reviewing the existing fees and making sure they are, as I've said, fair and balanced.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't
And we
express our opinions on it.
certainly have that ability and capabilities.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't express our thoughts or our opinions on the fees.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, I feel if it starts with us, it starts with harbor knowledge. If it starts upstairs, it starts with budget needs, not necessarily related to the costs of the harbor. Just, we need to raise this much money from everywhere in order to achieve our goal of minimizing tax increases.
Okay. Stevens presented an example of an area in the ordinance that could use clarification.
Well, the suggestion was that have Bill Kelly read it, see how he
That
translates it.
suggestion was made. Also, there could be other areas in the ordinance that could use some refinement. I believe that that's the case. And perhaps the Harbor Committee could undertake to identify some of those areas and present them.
Upland at 10. but
Okay,
I will follow
Susan,
minutes and
Thank you for
all
joining us
for your
today.
time.
Thank you, Susan.
And as Richard has described, reviewing the ordinance and updating it is a huge undertaking. I don't know that we want to do that.
Well,
It seems to me that, as Mark pointed out, if issues come up, you review the part that applies to that issue and make sure that you don't make a change that conflicts someplace else. But just starting from the beginning and reading through the whole thing, I don't know that is there an outside force or some change that's taken place that would bring us to a conclusion that the ordinance are outdated? I mean, just because they haven't been done for a while doesn't mean that they're necessarily just inherently outdated or that they don't still apply.
I haven't found any glaring issues with the harbor ordinance that need to be addressed.
No, I think it's issues that come up that are in conflict with the harbor ordinances that we're going to be having conversations about. And that's one of the things that's coming up here. But that doesn't require, may not necessarily require a change in the ordinance. It just requires a enforcement of the ordinance.
Okay, good point. Should Harbor Committee review of harbor fees be stated in the ordinance in some manner?
I think it should. That's what I said. That it should start with us.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that.
I do. For some reason, I thought that was in here. I just haven't found
Yeah,
it yet.
I did too.
Well, I've looked,
It used to be.
and I don't find it, nothing about Harbor Committee and harbor fees.
What were?
What are we looking for again?
I think that goes to you guys, 1086, that's kind of summarizes your directive. It's nothing in there about budgets.
No,
You
not,
always
not,
had
bu- not
talked
budget
about harbor
fees.
fees, yeah.
Fees, yeah.
I know we talked about them, but I don't think it specifically states that. It's just something going down.
So does the Harbor Committee want to proceed on the singular issue of 108-30B4?
Well,
Do we need a,
I don't see any, I believe that's complete, particularly if you include that with the permit procedures in this document that go on for 2 pages, maybe more.
well, do we need a,
That goes into great detail on how these things are approved.
I'm not understanding your point.
Just because it's written in the ordinance, the 3-line sentence about commercial structures or existing structures, there's a huge permitting process that is required to go through also. That will get lots of people involved reading this. Just because one person reads this and says, oh, that means we could build a road, a bridge to Curtis Island. Well, it's far more complicated to get that approved than what the one line of the ordinance says.
So are you arguing against any change to the ordinance or to that particular item?
I believe that particular sentence is fine as it is.
It is because in approval, you have to follow the standards of 10828.
Right. Which goes on.
6B, okay? And those are the standards you have to follow.
Yeah. All 9 of them, except for the reserved one.
So have we concluded that we really don't even need Bill Kelly's opinion on the part that Stephen brought up?
Honestly, I feel like we're jumping ahead. The question was, what should be on our work plan? So if we want to discuss this particular subsection or have other people suggest other subsections, we would do that once it's been on the agenda and had a chance to review it and think about it. And it's not to bring up issues to be acted on lickety-split at the meeting. I'm not prepared to, I have my memory of the conversation about that other float, but it's not very specific and I'm not reading it or studying it. So if I have no problem with it being on an agenda and maybe it lasts for 5 seconds or maybe it lasts for 45 minutes.
Or maybe it goes on for 3 months.
Whatever, but I don't want to get past the idea of let's talk about it the first minute we talk about it, because I'm not prepared to talk about it.
Well, this particular item of 108-30 has been on the agenda in October. It's on the agenda this month. It's not something that just popped up. Stephen has brought it up multiple times. So we
Allowed float size and number, I think the ordinance is fine the way it is there. In terms of number of
I don't
floats
see-
and their size. And
I don't see an issue with I don't see a concern. I think that it's just a grandfather clause. That's how I read it. But, like I say, I'm not a lawyer. So if we were going to get an opinion, we could get an opinion that would maybe put this to rest.
I agree. The reason that clause was put in there was for Lyman Morris to add the docks that they have added. Okay, and in any other project, there are standards that need to be applied and followed. And I think the harbor is protected by those standards.
Including length,
Yes,
since there's no restriction on length.
yes. One of the standards is displacing a substantial number of moorings.
Or interference with the channel,
Yes.
which brings us to our next issue.
this is not the first time that the ordinance has been changed for the benefit of the business across the harbor. Though the current, I'll call it a traveler slip, even though that's the improper term. That extends into the outer harbor, and we had to change the ordinance for them to add that.
The ordinance change is a townwide vote,
Right,
right?
Right.
So it's not, the whole town
that
votes on
happens
it.
all the time.
Whole town votes.
We change the ordinance. There's usually something on most elections have something in there that's getting changed. Yeah.
Okay.
Stephen, I'm hearing a lack of support for your position.
Me too.
I think we should all, I mean, there may be other nuances in here. I think we should put it on the work plan that we're all gonna see if there's
Review
any
it.
other small little things that need to be.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we need the town attorney to clarify, because I read it the same as Steve reads it, but there's,
You
but I
know,
think we should put it on the work plan.
the other
It all
thing to
depends
take
on the
into
meaning of
consideration is these review processes also go through the planning board.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think they're gonna be able to put whatever they want, but I do see
No,
what
and-
Steve said.
And they have their own set of standards to review. Next.
Yeah, next.
Okay, next. Outer Harbor Channel Marker Locations. Ron, you've brought this issue to the committee. You've provided us with documentation. We had a photograph last time, but we really didn't get to look at that. The channel markers, these are located by whom?
The ordinance puts the responsibility on the harbor master to install and maintain.
These are not, these
Installed
channel
and
markers, are they defined by the Coast Guard?
No,
Nope, they have nothing to do with the Coast Guard. They're privately maintained markers.
Okay. All right.
And you say privately maintained, you mean by the town?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, not federally maintained.
Right.
not by the Coast Guard.
Right. And not by Lyman Morris or someone else.
Right.
And these markers are not identified on NOAA maps.
They may be.
Charts.
No, they're not on the charts. No, there's,
And they would not be in the commercially available GPS applications.
no.
They may be.
So I asked my husband, he does trips out, at night. The only time he's had, I don't remember which navigation he was talking about, but yes, a vessel coming in at night may not be, that they're not on the charts. Is that what you're saying? Well, you're saying they're in the wrong spot, but yes, he would say a captain who may not be as versed in our harbor might have a hard time finding the channel. That was his opinion on it. And I know I'm bringing somebody else's opinion, but
Yeah, that's okay.
yeah.
Oh, I have the same opinion. I can back that.
Yeah,
up.
I mean,
it's-
because I'm not the one out there all the time, and I said, hey, what's your thought on this? And he said he personally doesn't have a problem because he knows where they are, but somebody coming in
At night, it's very
at
difficult
night
to
was
find that channel.
specifically what he said.
But I don't think that's what we're
Yeah.
addressing here.
No, well, I
Okay.
mean, the issue for me is that it's not in compliance with the ordinance. The way the
Which
harbor,
is-
the way the channel has been marked for over the years, it's been slowly evolving and changing and being moved to the west on one end and to the east on the other, on the inboard
But
end.
wouldn't
And
that
it's-
apply to people trying to find it?
Well, I think that's part
Yeah,
of the
okay.
argument in favor of keeping it consistent,
Okay.
is so that people can find it. It isn't what it used to be where,
If you, and I apologize that I didn't remember to, at some point, go down and to look out there, especially when there were moorings easily visible. But the question is enough of a variance that there are people's moorings that are actually on one side or the other in the paper channel as opposed to the marked channel?
well, there's a substantial number of moorings that have been moved in order to facilitate the channel being where it's marked now. I mean, there's, it's going to be, it would be very hard to determine other than to review bills received by the town for mooring relocation. And there may be some record that, of expense that the town has incurred to,
But what I'm saying is, there are channel markers right now, and I'm pretty sure that the moorings are aligned with those channel markers right now. But if the channel markers get moved to where the paper trail says they should be, are we gonna discover that there are moorings that are now in the channel?
Yes.
And are
Yes.
they moorings that would be on the
Oh,
Lyman Morse side of the world or on the Curtis Island side of the world?
On the Curtis Island, probably both sides, both sides. I mean, like I say, the channel has been moved to the east on the southern. Yacht Club end of the
Yeah.
channel has been moved to the east, and the Sherman's Point end of the channel has been moved to the north or west.
Okay.
So-
Are these markers seasonal?
Yes.
Are they still in place?
Really, they're not there in the winter?
No, they're required to be, the ordinance stipulates when they're to be put in, when they're to be taken out. I think they can be removed as early as September 15th, or they're required to be there until September 15th.
Can you cite the section where that's stated?
I think it's in the same section that describes the channel.
Okay, channels. Channel marker from June 1st to September 15th.
So,
It does not prescribe that they be pulled, but it says they have to be in place from June to September.
so Ron, do you know, so if the town, if Steve maintains, I mean, obviously we should hear from Steve, why, do you know why?
No, that's the
We
question.
don't know, okay, so we don't,
I don't
we-
know what
we
the
need to
reason is.
find-
This has evolved over many years. I
Right.
think is probably,
but why has it evolved?
Well, there's been,
yeah.
Right,
yeah,
so,
well, there's been consistently inconsistency.
Well, this is what it was
And
30 years ago.
There's been a gradual change over the years that is observable and that it does have some consistency. We're in a situation now where it's pretty much been moved every year based on my observation, that there's been a steady creep.
You'd think that in the modern world,
That's what
the
it
way
is
to
now.
identify it would be, there are these channel markers at these
So,
GPS points. And then you go out and you drop it right there.
Right. GPS recall being within a matter of a yard,
I don't
Right.
understand.
so.
Well, I guess my question is, what would you like to see happen? Is it just a matter of you want it to be consistent with what it says in the ordinance? Or do you feel there's some harm about where it is
There
now?
are problems with the existing
Yeah.
channel.
Yeah.
Why?
It's,
okay,
Not-
the
not-
complaints that I've gotten are that it's difficult to find. For people that aren't familiar, the change in the position of the channel has created a situation where there's a much sharper bend to make the entrance into the inner harbor. And it's at what's been marked as a very narrow part of the channel. We're conflicting with the yacht club's Camden Area Youth Sailing Program, that float that they use to store their boats on, which has been consistently in the same place for who knows how long. I don't have records on that, but it's
Well,
been
we're
there
showing you
for
records
as
here,
long as
Ron.
I
It's
can
30
remember.
years ago. So, I mean,
Well, so I'm saying I don't know how long. Okay, so you're saying it's been at least 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that
Right,
lends some,
so
These
can,
two don't
can
look
you-
significant.
can you look at this and look at the 30 years ago and the current and tell me, explain what it is and show me what's in the way of what you're talking about? Because I'm not following you.
you're not, well, have you read the description of the channel?
Okay, the day marker at the inner ledges off Northeast Point. I don't think that that's shown in this
That's the
photograph.
issue, Mark. If you read the description of the channel in the ordinance
Yeah,
and apply that to a chart, then you'll know where the ordinance intended for that channel to be.
okay. But I
Then-
mean, you're saying this is an issue that that's been creeping for years and it's changed, but I'm not comprehending it here because we're looking at what was here 30 years ago compared to what I see on Google Maps, and I'm not getting it.
Not very,
I don't get it.
It's
So
not significantly different. Where's the kind of sharp
What
turn
is
that
it
you're
that you
talking
don't-
about?
Did-
I mean,
So those are boats in
I'm-
motion.
I'm-
Those aren't moorings, right?
Did you-
that's
Correct.
about, that's
Yeah,
about-
but what about slightly to the right of that?
Oh, that, I don't know, I can't tell from here.
That's a boat in motion.
Yeah.
Hard to tell what that one
Yeah.
is.
And there are channel
Ron,
buoys out
can you show
here.
me, so that,
Some of the,
you
some of the
propose the
buoys
black line is,
refers
or no, the
to
blue line is the
vessels
one
like
that
the
is in the
Angelique
ordinance.
brought
That's
correct?
what's described in the ordinance, yeah.
So the less sharp turn.
Oh, look,
Or-
Roseway, we could only come in at
there
half
rather
tide.
than more over to the left.
Yes.
There's a bump out here
The
somewhere.
fact that it's impinging on the yacht club's float.
Yeah.
Hinging on the
Follow
yacht club,
the-
okay.
That's one of the issues
channel
that's been
has
brought
to
up to
come
me.
here. The fact is that about
Has
here.
that been brought up through the yacht club?
head
Right,
over to
have they-
Wayfarer.
Yeah.
Climb
Does
the
the yacht
Um,
club have a
easily.
problem with it? Is that?
It's just a point of conversation.
Hey, Richard.
They haven't had it
Okay,
on,
no,
I remember
not
on
when-
an agenda.
Okay.
When the new hollow slip was approved, wasn't there sort of like a gentleman's agreement? There would be no dockage against it?
Wait, what
or
are you
mentioned?
saying?
When the extension to the hollow slip was approved, wasn't there a discussion?
All out slip. You
I mean,
steamroll anything?
no, I'm sorry, a traveler slip. Wasn't there an agreement that there wouldn't be dockage against it?
I have no idea.
Well, there
I'd
wasn't,
have to go- have to
my
go
recollection
back
is there was an agreement
decades
that they
ago.
wouldn't put any big boats out there that would block the view. So we don't have, on this, Mark, we don't have the day marker on the ledges that we would need in order to establish a line on this. There may be
Well,
a
I
way
know.
that you could orient this chart to north and then, so then you could artificially superimpose this ledges out here.
Can I ask a
So what do you,
inappropriate question? It's not really inappropriate, but it's cutting to the chase. If there's a divergence here where this went this way and this went that way, is there somebody's ox that's getting gored, or that somebody who likes this because it pushes the channel away from Lyman Morse, or it allows a mooring field over here for, whomever? Or is it just plain that if we say it somewhere, we should put it somewhere?
well, it's similar to the conversation we were just having is if you're going to change the ordinance, it requires a vote of the town.
No, I get that, but my question is this
Well, it's-
part of someone's grand plan, or is it
Oh.
just plain,
It's just,
over the years, it's migrated?
right, this
That's,
is where it
well,
goes.
that's the question that I'd like to hear the answer to too. Yeah. I mean, everyone looks at me and say, what's the big deal, Ron? That's what my response is exactly. That's exactly what I would like to know. What is the big deal that has caused this channel to be moved almost 10 degrees from where it's described in the ordinance?
Well, I don't think there's ever going to be an answer to that, you know?
Well, I
Accidentally.
mean,
I
if
don't
there's,
get it.
no,
Get
if there's a justification, I would like to hear it. If
Can
there
you-
isn't
can
a
you tell me where the
justification,
big
then
marker
why
is?
don't we
Based
put it
on
back where
You-
it is described?
That dock there is that dock.
And I guess my response to that, Ron, is what is the problem with the current channel, other than the fact that it disagrees by 10 degrees from what's written in the ordinance?
There's a list of issues. It makes it, for someone who is coming in to Camden,
Here's the
who
yacht
is,
club.
well,
So
not
the
familiar
line-
with it, is going to have difficulty finding the channel. We have that. The channel it's become very narrow at the turn,
A point
from
at the
Inner Harbor to
easterly
Outer
end of the
Harbor,
wharf of the
and it's
Camden Yacht Club,
impinging on
whatever
the,
that
That's primarily an issue with the amount of water there.
no,
to the day
no,
marker,
this,
which is the
there's,
green one.
there's a consistent 10 feet of water all the way across there.
Northeast corner.
From from where it was originally established.
This one here.
In fact, if anything, we're moving into more shallow water.
Here to here.
Why
But
is
it's-
that true, Ron? Because I would have thought that off of, if the beginning of it, the inner harbor end of it was
Okay, so
closer
it
to
appears
Lyman
to-
Morris, that would be worse water.
In this photograph.
And if it's.
Oh, if you get too close to Lyman Morris,
Yes.
you're in shoals. But the channel as it was described in the ordinance, as it is described in the
Here's the big
ordinance,
marker here. So
was
this little
used
bit right here.
consistently for
Getting into
many years prior to when the ordinance was established. The ordinance, the channel that's described in the ordinance reflects the customary establishment of that channel. First of all, it lined up with Northeast Passage. It does not anymore. So someone entering from the Northeast Passage could just aim for the corner of the yacht club and know that they weren't going to end up in a mooring field. It also talks about the distance out from the boundary between the inner harbor and the outer harbor, 1,200 feet to the center of the outer harbor,
1,500.
1,500 feet, yep. That, not by coincidence, in my opinion, lines up with a course that you could take from the Bell that would take you past the can and intersect that inner harbor, or intersect the outer harbor channel as it's described. And that's how it always was for all the years that
Question,
I've used that.
does Steve do the taking in, putting out?
Yes,
And do those anchors for those buoys come out with them or?
they do.
Yes.
Okay, so they are reset every year?
Yes.
I'd be interested, because he's been doing it long enough, finding out the process. Is it by guess or by Gary, or does he have a GPS location and every year he puts it in the same place and that's where he started doing it when he first started, or how has it evolved?
Or does
Probably
he
got
say,
a lot
"Hey,
to do
this
with the
looks like-"
fact that there are still markers for the moorings there.
Right.
You know, they
Well,
don't, they don't take out the mooring markers, so,
Yeah, so.
so he probably just works off of them and,
Right.
you know.
Well,
And I
no,
can see
there's,
it as
like,
more moorings have gotten, if I'm wild guessing, I'd rather have a mooring over here under the shelter of Curtis Island
I was wondering
than
that
over
too.
here, and that may be why this bow coming around it is just if he's just eyeballing on mooring sites, then maybe he's,
Could have inched,
yeah,
those-
because, during the season, somebody comes in with a smaller boat, he says, oh, let's switch these more, yeah, just,
well, either way, though, the placement of moorings falls under his purview as well. I mean, for whatever's happening in terms of moorings having to be moved in order to accommodate the new channel, or vice versa, whichever way you want to look at it.
so
But
do we know that moorings have actually been moved to accommodate a change in the channel?
that's my observation.
Which moorings?
Just off the top of my head, Lyman Morse mooring 1 and 2.
Which are where?
They would have previously been on the yacht club side or the Curtis Island side of the channel.
Yeah.
They're not there anymore.
But where
They
are
may still have
Where are
numbers.
they?
I don't know.
Oh.
I have no idea. I just know that they're not where they used to be.
Right, but I guess we have to know,
I
is this-
honestly would have I have to do a serious search of the harbor to find Lyman Morris moorings 1 and 2, or help, or get Nancy to direct me.
Well, I
right, where
only-
they
I
said,
only-
oh,
I
we
only
need to
know where
move this
they-
to accommodate this channel that's out of ordinance.
So
We have to-
Ron, which way is,
That's a big
which way is the
conspiracy.
channel moving? Is it moving this way or this way?
Where
Do you
your
have one of
hand
these,
is,
Mark?
it's moving
Moving this way.
east.
The black line, I'm sorry, the black line represents the average of the markers on the green side. And the blue line, which I plotted on that plotter, just took a screenshot of it and made that copy for you, So that was,
What secures the channel markers to ground?
an assortment of
Concrete blocks.
big wheel hubs and, you know,
Mooring-
whatever
moorings,
heavy,
cones?
whatever heavy piece of metal they've have found up at the town garage.
But those
or-
stay, do those stay in
They don't stay in, they come out.
those come out too?
The moorings, the buoys and the moorings come out. That's been my observation. I mean, I don't know.
Every season, those
Every
get
season.
pulled and repositioned in the next spring.
That's the way that's my impression.
And your perception of things moving, does that present a navigational hazard?
Well, it depends on whether nothing that would have been designated as a navigational hazard by the Coast Guard, no. No, but I mean, if it's in terms of if the channel were as it was described and had been remained consistent historically, then it would be easier to navigate. So given that we've altered it, that does add a challenge to navigation, if that's,
I'm not perceiving how that,
I'm sorry.
Makes that
I've got a
hard.
meeting, I gotta.
all right, Bob, thank you.
Yeah, I'm right behind you, Bob.
So what you're
I got
saying is
other
these
things
moorings
to do in
here-
life.
Are the ones that are an issue.
we can't determine anything from that photograph until we establish where that line is on that photograph, where this line that's described in the ordinance falls on that photograph. We don't have the day marker on the ledge on that photograph to enable us to draw a line from the corner of the yacht club
Well, we
to the
have
day
this
marker.
dock here, which we can certainly,
I'm not saying we can't fabricate a position that would allow us to use that photograph mark. I'm just saying we don't have it right now. We haven't done the work that it would take to orient that chart and then plot we actually could plot a line from the corner of the yacht club if that photograph was oriented without actually having the marker on the ledges. That's doable, but we'd have to orient that chart somehow to a compass. It's being given that it doesn't have a rose on it. And it's not like it's a chart where the left and right boundaries are oriented north-south. They're not necessarily.
Ron, is it your belief that this movement of the channel markers is intentional?
Yes,
And what is the intention?
I don't know, other than to facilitate something that they've decided is a priority. I mean, I don't know, that's like we just said, that's, people ask me, what's the big deal? And that's my response. I would like to know, what is the big deal that has brought about this significant change? And
I don't know. Liz, go ahead.
I'd like to, I have some computer work to do after this meeting. I'd like to send an email to Steve since he's not with us today, and maybe he can respond to us for our next meeting I think we need to hear from him whether this has inched organically or if there's some sort of intention here. But I do think it's important for us to hear from the person who's actually placing the markers. You said that the gear is coming up. And I guess, not that I don't believe you, I'm just surprised. I'm surprised that gear comes up. It seems to me that he would go out with the Scott brothers and
Winter-
put them
mark,
just like he
yeah.
does with the moorings. So just wondering, has this kind of creeped over time? I mean, I've seen them, we've had boats moved. Oh, this one goes here. Let's move this mooring over a little to accommodate. So I think I'd like to send him an email since he's not here with us today to prepare a paragraph of his explanation. So we may not agree with it, or it doesn't necessarily change anything you're saying, Ron, but hearing from the source.
Well, I'm not,
Okay, please hold that for a second. Go ahead, Stephen.
I've just heard mentioned, most of this is talk about the width of the channel and where it is. But twice I've heard mentioned, for incoming boats, the difficulty of finding the channel. And, from my mooring, I've witnessed visiting boats coming in, because I think the mooring field has stretched out towards the big empty area of the outer harbor, that people do have trouble finding where the entrance is, and that, a potential solution for that, which doesn't deal with this issue, is putting some markers further out that can be spotted from entering via Curtis Island.
Right, because does it propose a navigational hazard? I mean, you almost said it, it's whether you're coming or going,
well, if I had never entered Camden Harbor before, and I was looking at the chart thinking, okay, how am I going to get in here? I'd go to the bell, say, okay, I see that. I see Curtis Island. Okay, I know where I am. Okay, and I'm going to take a course past that can. Well, if you take a course past the can, you're going to end up in a mooring field. There's a lot of times the can is not even visible from where we have to go now.
Yeah, it's that damn big black boat that's out there.
Well, there's a whole bunch of boats, but at any rate,
Further in from my boat that they're stretching.
But I agree,
But
that's
is
been
it-
brought up twice. I think it's a valid point, whether the channel's in the right place. We want people to safely come into Camden Harbor.
So maybe the issue would be put more channel markers out further.
That's what I just said.
Would you
Maybe
like me
even
to,
one with a blinker
would you
on.
like me to send an email to Steve? Would that be a start?
Well,
I'm not, my primary concern is not finger pointing or finding the reasoning behind it, unless that reasoning, which I think what we're confronted with here is either we bring the channel into compliance with the description in the ordinance, or we change the ordinance to comply with where we think the channel needs to be.
I guess I was just wondering, maybe he has an explanation that's more up from a
Well, there
less
may-
ordinance and more of a logical.
And that's my point. There may be good reasons why it's been changed, why it's been moved so extensively.
Do we have a date?
And it
Right.
would be good, it would be good to hear
December
those reasons.
Right, I don't think we need to point fingers and wonder why.
Well, and I think he's under the impression that he can put it wherever he wants, which
Which most likely is a year after year after year.
Liz, I'd like you to withhold your email to Stephen, unless you
Sure.
want to communicate with him personally.
Okay.
You're welcome to do that.
Okay, no, it's fine. I just didn't know if it would help.
So there are other photos like this at Lyman Morris. I think, I
there's 6
can't
of them.
remember where, like in the bathroom wall or something. And they may have the,
Yeah, I
Jim-
have one, but I think it's just a copy of that.
Okay, can I go down to the yacht club? Are these markers still in?
I don't know. I circulated this 3 months ago
Yes.
with an intention that somebody could go down there at any time at their convenience and stand on the easterly corner of the yacht club and look at the day marker on the ledges, on the inner ledges off Northeast Point, and come to their own determination as to where the channel is now, where the channel markers are in comparison to where it's described in the ordinance. That's
I've done that several times, but in the opposite direction, from northeast over by boat, and I don't know. I'm just.
Well, if you don't know, then you can go to the other end of it. I mean, it's just navigation. It's not.
I know, but you're talking about it's a navigation issue. Well, you're not going from land on the yacht club out to creating a navigation issue. It's finding it coming in, which is the navigation issue.
Well, I think it works both ways. I don't think that that it only pertains to,
You think
Egress
it's
or
difficult
access.
to find the channel to get out?
I think it would be good to know that that channel is where it's described, that's all. I don't know.
I doubt there are many navigators looking at the ordinance at their helm and saying, well, is it 75 feet wide and am I in line with the day marker and the monument located at the seawall in front of the condominium?
I can't help you with all of the extraneous things that might come up in the conversation. I can only point out that we are not in compliance with the ordinance. And I've received complaints, concerns from numerous people about, well, what's happening to the channel? And I say, well, that's a good question.
What are
So
their,
I'll-
what are the concerns other than, what, is it
One
narrowing?
concern
Is
was,
what is-
one concern was voiced by a person who has a fairly large yacht and says, boy, this is it really getting to be a challenge.
So is it narrow? Is that what that
It's
specific?
narrow and the
Okay.
angle has been increased by at least 10 degrees and it's, we now have a situation where the corner of the float that the KSAP, Camden Area Sailing School uses is right in the channel, on the corner of the channel. So that brings up issues with regard to the safety of the young sailors that are out there using that facility. And why are we creating a situation which endangers them? I mean, is there a good reason for that? If there isn't, then why don't we move it back to where it belongs so that those children aren't endangered by large vessels coming and going?
So it's at the yacht club end of the channel, which is where the issue is.
That's where the biggest issue is in terms of safety, in terms of the welfare of
I
the
mean, There's
citizens.
not much room there. The
That's
whole
where the-
area is kind of.
That's where the channel is shifted at the yacht club end of it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you can't, I can't help you other than to either take you down there, Mark, and show you, or just, I've given you the printout. I don't know how else I can help you. I think that if you go down there.
Well, you could explain how it's different than this photo. I mean,
If we,
that's probably the simplest way. I mean, you got,
We can-
that's the yacht club.
we've already had that
Float right there.
conversation, Mark. I said, I'd be perfectly willing to try, make an attempt to orient that chart north-south, north
I don't
to the
get how
compass.
changing the channel, it's gonna make more.
So you're saying at the yacht club end, the channel should be moved more toward Lyman Wharf?
That's gonna make us sharper.
Yes.
Correct.
That's gonna make a
Should be moved
sharper
over here.
angle though.
So
So how does that?
there-
Reduces the angle.
There are two boats over
Found it?
here that I've seen that
Yeah, one is
may
Artisan
possibly.
and-
One's Artisan and the other, I
I
can't
think it's a
remember.
Lyman Wharf sometimes has the big inflatable on it for.
So
I think it was a,
that would be less of an angle. That would be more of an angle, so. If you move the channel this way, they're gonna have more of an angle, right? It just seems a little I mean, right? So it seems like the yacht club float is,
because it,
Just gave away my last.
Yeah, if you move it in, it's a sharper.
it's a
tighter
sharper,
angle.
so it's counterproductive of what that yacht owner is actually saying. Because if we were gonna move the channel more,
that way.
This
So-
way,
so
they're gonna
then it
have
would be
less of an
actually the
angle.
moorings
It's less-
on this side.
Less of an angle, right, exactly. That's what this,
So it's-
that's what this illustrates for you.
It's the moorings on this side that are the issue then.
Well,
which is gonna
that's
bring them closer to the yacht club
moorings,
dock.
the moorings on the southerly side.
Well,
Are what's
here,
described.
what is channels? A point at the easterly end of the wharf of the Camden Yacht Club. What does that mean in this image?
There.
Not this here.
No.
This here.
Yeah.
Right, just go up and stand at the corner of the seawall up there. basically is the point.
But you want, but Ron, the ordinance goes this way. So right now the channel is more this way and the ordinance shows it this way, so that will make their angle steeper.
I can act like a member.
The channel has been moved.
So you want.
This end has
you want
been
it to
moved in
come
this direction.
so
This end
I'd
has
have to
been
change
moved
my
over here.
clothes.
If you, that's what this visual.
Get my brass
Right,
button
right, I'm
jacket
looking
on.
at it though.
Oh, you have to get a belt.
All right. I spent my limited time here.
So if you're coming out of the harbor.
I have to go.
Make a move for adjournment.
All right, with
And the blue is
the
what it
Harbor
should
Committee
be.
meeting is adjourned.
That's a movement.
Okay, now I understand.